welcome to the regular business meeting for February 5th. Welcome, Squamish, welcome to the Traditional Territories of Squamish Nation. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Herbert. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Any notice of motion? We have, do we have a delegation? The proclamation? Okay, so we have one proclamation on the agenda. It's a proclamation request. The Council proclaimed February 18th to the 24th, 2019 as Heritage Week in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councilor Anderson. Thank you. Seconded by Councilor French. Excuse me. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. All right. Any consideration of unscheduled public attendance? So this would be anyone who feels they have an issue that can't wait until the next regular business meeting. All right, moving on. We have District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw number 2200, Amendment Bylaw number 2549. This is the Eagle Run Drive.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning and Infrastructure. I'm here tonight to present a rezoning application at 1585 Eagle Run Drive for consideration of first and second reading. Subject property is located at 1585 Eagle Run Drive, west of the Petro-Canada on Government Road. The property is zoned Residential 1, is in a secondary floodway and limited densification area. There is a dike running through the rear of the property that requires upgrading. Surrounding properties are zoned Residential 1 and Residential 2, while lots on the corners of Eagle Run Drive and Government Road are zoned C2, Vehicle Fueling Station Commercial, and C1, Local Commercial. The lot was subdivided in 1988 and has remained undeveloped. This RS1 site proposes to rezone to Residential Small Lot, RS3, to allow the property to be subdivided, creating an additional lot. While both lots would be well above the 250 square meter minimum parcel size for the RS3 zone, the majority of the rear of the property is not developable given the dike and associated dike setback. A successful rezoning to RS3 and subdivision will allow for two 162.58 square meter or 1,750 square foot homes. Under the current RS1 zoning, the maximum allowable floor area for one single unit dwelling is 790 square meters or 8,504 square feet. The property is favorably located for this type of small infill development. It is walking distance from Eagle Run Park, bus stops on Government Road, and local commercial shops. This slide shows a draft subdivision plan. The subject property is located in a secondary floodway in Zone C5 of the Chikai Fan debris flow hazard. The proponent has provided a geotechnical report confirming that the limited densification area requirements outlined in section 11.5 of the official community plan can be met. The key design aspect presented in the report is an open parkade concept below the flood construction level to achieve floodway conveyance criteria and to minimize the impact of a debris flow on the structure. This slide shows a conceptual image of an open parkade concept. Community amenity contributions are to be negotiated as part of a rezoning application in order that new development contributes its fair share to community infrastructure required by new growth. The CAC policy identifies a target of $20,000 per new single detached lot, which the proponent has offered, and an additional $1.50 per square foot of additional residential gross floor area for active transportation and parks amenities. As this rezoning is not creating additional residential gross floor areas, the proponent have not offered cash in lieu for active transportation and park amenities. However, the proponent has agreed to provide public access along the dike right-of-way. Limited densification area policies state that rezoning applications adjacent to the Squamish or Mamcram River South dikes are to be upgraded at the applicant's expense and that a statutory right-of-way for the 1 in 500 year return period dike be provided. The geotechnical report provides a cost estimate of $32,949 for the dike upgrade works on the subject property. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. The project was posted on the district's development showcase. One request for a public information meeting was received, and one comment has been received. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw number 2200-2011, number 2549-2019 be given first and second reading, that a public hearing for bylaw number 2549-2019 be scheduled for March 5th, 2019 at 6 p.m., and that, subject to the results of a public hearing and third reading, the adoption be considered following the resolution of the following items: registration of an updated Section 219 flood covenant, statutory right-of-way for the 1 in 500 return period dike, including a provision for public access, and execution of a land development agreement to secure the applicant's proposed voluntary community amenity contribution of $20,000 for the additional single detached lot and $32,949.39 for cash in lieu for dike upgrades along the property. Staff alternatively recommend that bylaw number 2549-2019 be referred back to staff for further review. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Council, any questions? Councilor Reyes.
Thank you. And so the provision for public access in the right-of-way is new from the report. The report didn't actually mention that, at least on the same page, but I take it that would be one of the conditions.
Yes, it would be.
And can you tell me, it's more for my curiosity, the subdivision that is to the south and east, which is a relatively new subdivision, does that also have public access across the right-of-way?
It does, yes.
It does, yeah. And then the space between 1585 and 7, is that owned by somebody, or is that district?
It's district road dedication.
It's a road dedication?
Yes.
So that's a way for people to get off the dike?
This slide shows the street view from Google Maps. So that's this, the area to the right is the subject property, and that's the parking lot kind of in that road dedication area. And as you can see, there's a trail kind of going up from the parking lot there to the dike.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Burke, any Councilor
Thank you. I was just asking, I'd like to ask about clarification on that dike access across the top. If you go back to the previous slide, you had it highlighted. Yeah. So it continues, that access is the same, would essentially be a continuation of that blue shaded area into 1585 or not?
Yes.
Okay. Right. I know in other spots there's access that's below dike grade that's a trail, but this is actually proper across the top. That was my, okay, thank you.
So 2 questions. One, when we're talking about the things the district needs to do to upgrade our own dikes, I'm hearing really big numbers, and so maybe I just don't have a good understanding of the scope, but 32,000 seemed like a very small amount for this big number. So is this just a smaller section of dike, and that's how it all plays out, or?
The cost estimate was based off unit rates provided from the district to the geotechnical engineer that they've seen on similar projects, and this is given the length of the frontage that the dike runs through. This is just specifically to do the upgrades on this subject property based off of those unit rates that were provided to their geotechnical engineer.
But those unit rates are generally in line with what we're using across the board?
Yes.
So the other question, when I read the report, it seemed that most of the mitigation, to my understanding, was related to dike flooding and not so much around the debris flow, potential debris flow, unless I misunderstood. So what would be the process if this gets approval? Is there some stage where we review the construction, the materials and all of that with regards to debris flow, or is that something we need to be considering now, or when does that happen?
If I may, through you, Mayor, so we would consider that through the building permit process. That's what we would look at construction, and debris flow would be a relevant consideration.
Any other questions, Council? Do you want to put a motion forward? Councilor Reyes?
Yeah, I'll move the staff recommendation, including the provision for public access on the right-of-way.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor French. Any more discussion, Council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Up next, we have a staff report, airport infrastructure grant opportunity.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nab Gill. I'm from Real Estate Services, and I'm joined by Chris Wickham from Engineering. We are here to obtain authorization to submit a grant application to the BC Air Access Program so that we can complete a runway rehabilitation project at the Squamish Municipal Airport. The airport is a key emergency asset for our corridor, and the runway was constructed in the 1970s. Since then, we've only completed minor repairs, which include crack filling and line painting. As you can see, the runway is in bad shape from these pictures. What this project entails is repairing all the cracks, as well as adding a 50mm overlay over the whole runway. The application is due on February 18th. And the total cost of this project is $550,000. The grant portion is 75%, which amounts to about $400,000, and the remaining funds would come from the district's airport reserves, which is around $137,000. As such, we put this motion forward to council, and I will pass it back to you for any questions.
Any questions, Councilor?
What are the reasons we wouldn't just pause on this until we're more certain about the debris flow mitigations?
Through you, Mayor. We've tried to delay this project, but we're at a point where these repairs really need to be done. The cracks are too large to continue to fill and repair that way, so the project is really imminent.
Any other questions? Councilor?
Yes, the airport fund, what, I believe it was in the report, I'm just not seeing I thought it might be on one of your slides, just how much of that are we using, would we potentially be using for this project?
Through you, Mayor, we have about $154,000 in there, and we'll be using $137,000.
Thank you.
So staff would propose that we pursue this grant. Does anybody want to move?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Councilor Hurd, second by Councilor Grace. Any other comments? Councilor Grace?
Just briefly, just 2 points. And one is, it's a significant part of the airport reserve, but I think this is what those funds are for, is something like this. And so I don't have a problem spending the money in this fashion. And just to Councilor Pettingill's question, my understanding of the effect of the debris flow mitigation and the airport is it affects perhaps additional buildings or subdivision or servicing around there, but the airport runway itself is something that would be a constant. There's no talk of abandoning it regardless, so I think it is appropriate to go ahead right now if the need is there.
Thank you. Councilor French?
I support the motion. I think that this work is long overdue and looking forward to when it's completed.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Structural Flood Mitigation Grant Support. So this is for application for the Phonetic Park CDEC.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Rolston. I'm the Manager of Municipal Infrastructure for the district. Tonight I'm seeking Council's approval for 2 grant applications. The first, as you mentioned, is for the Phonetic Park Sea Dike, and we're applying under the Rural and Northern Communities Grant Fund. So building a continuous sea dike surrounding downtown Squamish is the next highest priority flood protection project after our current project that we're working on, the Squamish River Dike. This grant offers up to 90% of funding for projects, and there's no cap on the amount that projects can cost. This project is estimated at $4.5 million, so we're submitting a grant application to receive just over $4 million in grant funding, and the district would be required to fund the remainder of roughly $500,000. And there will be a full public and council consultation over the specific design of the dike that we expect would be initiated later in 2019. The second project is to complete a seismic assessment of the Squamish River Dike under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. So the assessment is estimated at $110,000, and the grant funds up to 100% of project costs. up to a cap of $150,000. So this project would complete a geotechnical assessment of the Squamish River Dike in Brackendale and look at potential options to meet the province's seismic guidelines for dikes. So completing this work is a requirement that has been established by the Provincial Inspector of Dikes and must be completed whether or not we receive this grant. So the grant funding would just subsidize work that already needs to be completed. And so I won't reread the motion, but it's seeking council support for these two grants.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. $4.5 million for this dike project?
That's
alone?
correct.
That's the highest number I've heard for one of those dikes.
We have some very good cost estimates for this because of recent construction that's taken place for the Moreau and Sirocco dikes. It's very expensive because of seismic requirements. If you recall, when the Sirocco dike was built, they were required to pound 1,500 timber piles into the channel in order to densify the ground. And so I think that was $1 million in just ground densification before talking about the sheet piles, the fill, and then this project would also include some sort of landscaping, lighting, bike path, pedestrian path on the surface of the dikes. So it is very costly to build sea diking, and the ground conditions don't make it any less costly.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
The Pontiac Park was the subject of a project a few years ago, a partnership between the District of Squamish and the Downtown Business Improvement Association to apply for a legacy grant with the federal government. We were successful, and this is the background to the canoe shed that is on the property. The canoe shed is intentionally movable. My question is, can the concept design and consultation process consider options to protect future recreational uses of that shoreline when there is an assumption that it will be built, to quote from your report, in similar form as the dike recently constructed to the north. So there may be some trade-offs here with respect to future recreational paddler access. One of the concepts was for a float dock so that we could host Salish canoe racing festivals between the Squamish Reserve waterfront and Pontiac Park. So that's my question. Can we assume that your concept design and consultation process will fully consider those potential recreational uses for paddlers in particular?
Through the Mayor, certainly the use of the park and water uses would be a significant part of the public access. And in addition to that, there are some water access points being constructed through the Sirocco development as part of those developments. So there actually will be building some floating gangways and dock infrastructure at or near the Victoria and Winnipeg street ends as well. So we'll certainly take into account works that are already planned as well as any additional desire to accommodate water access.
Continue.
Has an alternate form for the dike, as was discussed 2, 3, 4 years ago, diagonally extending through the property, and who knows what we may do to the south from there, been considered and perhaps ruled out in your consideration so far?
Through the Mayor. Yes, the Integrated Flood Hazard Management Plan identified a vertical sheet pile type of dike all up and down the Mamquam Blind Channel through downtown. That's because of the very narrow widths of parcels within that area, and also a desire to try and limit the amount of fill that would go into the channel. So if we were going to pursue some kind of different dike design, like a standard dike with a sloping face, or a green shores type of dike, it would occupy a much larger width, and so it would either necessitate filling further into the channel or losing space within the park itself. So the vertical type seawall occupies the least amount of space and limits fill and also preserves the maximum usable space within the park.
Thank you.
Other questions? What are ways to build these vertical sea dikes with habitat in mind?
Yes, there are. So there are opportunities to build reef balls is one potential thing that's been implemented on the Sirocco developments. So they're basically concrete balls with holes in them, and they're put on the seabed in front of the sheet pile, and they basically create potential habitat for marine life. There are other similar things that have been used in the Vancouver Convention Center, basically large structures that maximize surface area and the potential for marine life to grow on them. So those are items that we'll be pursuing through the design phase, and also that DFO will be reviewing and potentially requiring.
Any other questions? Can we do these together?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettigrew. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Hopefully we are successful. Next up, we have the Sky High Cannabis Provincial License Referral. Someone made it through the comments.
Good evening. My name is Jonas Vilniškis, the Director of Community Planning, and today I'm bringing you a referral from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch of BC. So it's a provincial process, similar to liquor licensing in the district. However, the liquor licensing process has been delegated to staff, so staff process those requests from the province, and we haven't reflected yet how we're going to deal with cannabis, so the default is it comes to council. The property at 38054 is the property in question today. It's for Sky High Cannabis, which is already operating a dispensary, a cannabis retail store at this location. So the business license has been issued for this operation in April of last year. And then following the legalization of cannabis retail, we received a referral in November. We've received other inquiries from the province about another dispensary in the district. However, that one had a development variance permit attached to it. So there was, the province took that as indication of where the district stands on the referral. So we haven't received other referrals, although we know the province is working on not just this one. So we, as required by the province, published 2 notices in the Squamish Chief newspaper advertising that we have received this referral and that we're soliciting feedback. We received 3 comments over a 2-week period, and those comments were attached to the staff report. There's 2 comments in support of it, and 1 seems to be in opposition. The applicants have also submitted a petition with 900 signatures from them, from their store. So the reason why the business has been operating since 2018 is that the district has issued a business license. Back in 2016, the district has proactively set up a regulating regime for cannabis retail, and we've so far issued 4 licenses, I believe, in Squamish. So as required by LCRB, the notice has been issued, and we require a council motion in order to respond to the province. The province will not process this application unless they hear back with a council motion and the public feedback from the district. Just want to note that we are planning to bring an update to the procedures bylaw that would include delegating these referrals to staff. So the recommendation today is that we respond with no objection to the cannabis retail store license application.
Do you, Mr. Vilniškis? Councillor Race?
Thank you. So this actually cleared up something I wasn't certain of, because I was wondering how municipalities in the province, or how municipalities deal with the province vis-a-vis saying yes or no to these applications. And you read in the media about Kamloops and other municipalities and their council has said yes to something. I've been waiting for something to come to us, and I thought we'd see it for the last one, the development variance permit property. But what you're saying then is that if there's something like a DP or a rezoning that's required to allow this, they will take that as evidence of municipal approval. But if there's nothing like that, then they want a resolution. This is the step then.
Yes, that's exactly it. We've asked the province whether they would consider the fact that the district has rezoned, has established a regulatory regime for the zoning bylaw where they can occur, and the response from the province is that it has to be property specific. So something like a development variance permit or a specific rezoning would then probably replace this referral.
As evidence of municipal approval. Thank you.
Councillor Pettengill?
Have previous councils discussed any caps on the density of these retail locations in different parts of Squamish?
Yes, I believe back in 2016 when we went through the process, we did consider whether there should be an actual number of licenses and a cap on it, or whether we would do it by establishing different buffers, so buffers from schools, places where youth gather, such as Brennan Park and the skate park, and then distances from other dispensaries, and we decided to go that route rather than trying to put a limit on it. At that time, we calculated how many locations that would produce, and it looked like it was around 10, given the setbacks.
Councillor Rees?
Do we still have that, I know we had a discussion around buffers with the development variance permit, the other application. Do we still have that buffer, these various buffers in place?
We do. So we have a 300-meter buffer to schools and a 300-meter buffer to other dispensaries.
So if we received an application for somebody next door to this particular property, they'd have to go through the DVP process?
Yes.
Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, someone want to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Rees, seconded by Councillor French. Any other discussion, Council?
Well, I'll just make the comment. Thinking back to the application we had, which was just before the election, and we commented on the necessity for the buffer with schools and the history of that and so forth. And my recollection was that that was going to be reviewed by staff and possibly brought forward as an amendment to the zoning bylaw. And I would assume in that also that 300-meter buffer between various businesses would also be considered at the same time. And I'm a little off topic because it doesn't really deal with this one, but just looking at the framework generally, I don't have a problem with this. It's a commercial area, this is a commercial business. It's legal now. I used to have a problem with that part. but so I'm happy to support this part. But I'd also look forward to just considering these buffers now, knowing what we know and now that they're legal, and whether or not we should just let the market take its course, like every other business.
We are planning to bring back a few updates to the business license bylaw and maybe the zoning bylaw that will bring us in line with the provincial regulations. There's a few things like the screening of the windows that our business license bylaw require that is in conflict with provincial regulations that we need to fix. And at that time we can consider whether the district wants to do away with those buffers. We haven't seen a big influx of variance applications. We've definitely fielded a lot of inquiries about dispensaries in Squamish. But other than the one variance that we've processed, I think we have one other one right now on Cleveland Avenue. But we haven't seen a big influx of variances. So my recommendation would be to wait a little longer before we take away those barriers.
I don't know where this sits in the provincial application process. I don't know whether our decision is near the beginning or the end.
The end.
It is the end, okay. All right, I'm happy to support this. It'd be nice to have people with a business license and a provincial license. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up, I can see 2019 grant application. The Night of Grants. Maybe we'll win them all. Patrick. Great. Over to you, Ms. Gunn.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Dora Gunn, Sustainability Coordinator with the District of Squamish, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing 2 proposed applications for the Bike BC Fund. The Bike BC grant is a provincial grant for cycling infrastructure. It can provide up to 50% of eligible project costs. That is most costs for the project except what they call end-of-trip facilities, which include things like bike racks, wayfinding signs, and lighting. And those things can only be 15% of the total project cost. The focus of the grant is on commuter cycling as opposed to recreational cycling. They're trying to encourage cycling for transportation purposes to reduce GHG emissions. The projects have to be a part of a cycling network plan. So in our case, we have our active transportation plan that was developed in 2016. And the projects have to be ready for construction, which means that they have to be able to be built within a year of receiving funding approval. Bike BC has a preference for separated bike paths. So those are paths that are either off-road or separated from vehicle traffic by some sort of barrier. So this year we're proposing 2 applications, both related to the Discovery Trail. Unfortunately, you can't see that map particularly well, but this map shows the general route of the Discovery Trail. Thanks. So there's currently either gravel or paved trail along this whole route, starting with Squamish Elementary down in the south and then heading up towards the Mamquam River. And then the northern portion past the Mamquam follows alternate routing but provides connectivity almost all the way to Mamquam Elementary. The active transportation plan recommends upgrading this connection to 3-meter paved with lights, similar to the corridor trail. This will provide an excellent off-road bike and pedestrian route on the west side of the highway. We're proposing to upgrade it in phases over time. So starting in the south, the yellow portion is going to be completed by the Jumar development. The black portion has already been built. It was built last year, and that runs adjacent to Squamish Elementary and House End Secondary. The green portion is rideable currently, but it is not yet built, and we are not proposing to build that yet because it goes through the Buckley Affordable Housing Project. So we'll wait until that project is nearing completion before we construct that part of the trail. And then the part in pink, which is the next part up, is what we're proposing for our first application to Bike BC. So it runs along the side of Dentville there. And then the second application is the 2 blue dots further up. They are at the industrial and commercial intersections with the highway. And the proposal is to upgrade those intersection crossings. And I'll provide more detail on both of those. So this image shows a bit of what it looks like where the trail runs beside Dentville. And so we're proposing to separate off a section from the road with a barrier. And then, so it would be a 3-meter paved trail with lighting, as you can see in the drawing. Another part of that trail runs through a little forested land that's looking north towards the brick. And again, it would be 3 meters paved with lights. So that's the first application. The second application is intersection upgrades, and this is just an example. It shows commercial, and the industrial intersection is very similar. And currently people tend to cross across commercial, where you can see that red dotted line, which is really unsafe because cars are exiting off the highway or entering the highway at relatively high speeds. So what we're proposing to do is to build, as you can see, we'll extend a connection from the Discovery Trail over to the crosswalks and then the pedestrian controlled beacons, so that people can go across the safe crossing and not cross the dangerous crossing. And those would be raised above the curb so that they'd be separated from traffic. So the budget for the trail upgrade project, the total cost is approximately $470,000. And we'd be applying to Bike BC for about $164,000, with a municipal contribution of $305,000 coming from DCC. And the reason it's not 50-50 is because there's a significant lighting portion of this project, so we have to bear more of the burden of that because it can only be 15% of the total eligible project cost for Bike BC. The second project is the intersection upgrades. The total cost of that project is $265,000. we'd be applying to Bike BC for 100,000. That's because we can't layer grants, and we only have 100,000 available in our active transportation capital infrastructure fund. That's not from a grant, so we'll use that 100,000 to match with the Bike BC 100,000, and then the remaining 65,000 will have to come from the Community Works Fund, which is part of the active transportation capital fund. And so that brings me to my recommendation.
Councillor French?
I'm curious to know the raised curb, as I understand, for the two intersections.
Yeah.
What height is the raised
Well,
curb?
actually don't know, it's regular curb height that you see around town for a curb. So it is possible a car could jump that curb, I suppose, but the same risk everywhere else in town.
Wow, look at all these hands. I got Councillor Rice, Councillor Anderson, and Councillor Herbert.
Thank you. Could you go back to the overhead, the one that showed the roof?
Yeah.
That's
Sorry. There we go. Yeah.
So, when we were on a tour last year, the year before, we went along the trail that is more or less an extension of the green line that comes down. You can kind of see the cut through the forest. And there was a discussion at that time, it's just gravel or crush. There was a discussion about the possibility of paving it at a significant cost. And we discussed not paving it because we thought that it would be better to have a paved route going somewhere along the other side, either up Buckley or now through this trail. Did we ever pave that?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure which portion you're
So
speaking
if
The
you
about.
lower green section?
Yeah, if you go where the straight green is, where the two
Straight
crossings
green?
are, and just go straight down from that, you can see the cut through the forest. And I believe that's the trail that we were on.
So generally speaking, the existing trail follows the alignment shown on this map with the colors. The only difference is right down the very south, the current or the older Discovery Trail actually goes on the east side of the schools. So that might be what you're
That's the
thinking
one I'm talking
of.
about. It went on the east side. It was not the trail, I'm almost positive it wasn't the trail you show colored here.
Okay, so the portion that goes on the east side of the school actually runs through private land. And so we had an opportunity last year to acquire school district land at no cost to us to build the trail there, which also provides a connection between the schools. So we opted to shift our focus over to the trail that runs on the west side of the schools and align the trail that way so we could avoid the private land acquisition and provide the connectivity between schools.
And so there was no paving of that one?
No.
Okay. I was concerned about that because it's kind of nice the way it was and it was quite a cost to pave it. So we wanted to try to avoid doing it twice.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, going down the line. Councillor Anderson.
Earlier this evening, we passed a resolution proclaiming Heritage Week in the District of Squamish. I'm not sure what value this may be for your Bike Week or the application, Bike BC, but the route of the corridor trail as you have it depicted on this map follows almost identically the original wagon road of the Squamish Valley, built exactly 130 years ago.
Interesting.
It was on the west bank, or the west side rather, of the earlier Mampum River course.
Interesting, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you. Can you go to the image you had of the intersection? I have a question about the intersection. Yeah, thank you. And actually, that red line, that one's a great image. So I've seen in other areas where you want to control the safe movement of the humans through there, whether they're cycling or walking in, putting some sort of fencing or something through the middle there, because I know that providing the curb is going to keep people, ideally prevent cars from coming up onto it, but as far onto the trail. But when you come down that trail, it's very tempting to go straight across. And I wonder if that can somehow be incorporated into the design here, so it just takes away that possibility, as well as providing a safe path, because if you provide the straightest path and the safest path, you may still find people taking the straightest path. And I'm trying to envision the other intersection, if it doesn't have a concrete center on it like that, does it?
Through the mayor, so we have contemplated that possibility. There's two ways you could do it. Either if there's a median, in this case there is, you could put a fence on the median. The alternative is to put a fence at the edge of the curb on either side to stop people from going that way. So we haven't gotten to the detailed design phase of this project yet. When we do that, we can look into those considerations.
Yeah, and my question was going to be about the overall budget of the project and whether we have room in there for those design elements.
Yes, through the mayor. At this point, these are fairly high-level cost estimates, and they'll be refined through detailed design. And there's room.
Any other questions? In terms of cars coming off the highway, onto the highway, if people are using those crosswalks, is there a way to make people notice that there's someone in the crosswalk? I'm thinking about smaller people that are using these. And, you know, do flashers help? Can we signalize them somehow?
So everything has to be approved by MOTI. There are likely more options. Better signage is something we could do right now to improve those, and we have been discussing that with MOTI. Better lighting is another possibility as well. So the work we do here with building the curb doesn't preclude any future work on lighting, but that would be another project.
But we couldn't put up like a little flasher that we do on our crosswalks here
I haven't discussed that possibility with them, but I could.
I'm just thinking of like habit building with the smaller members of our community. They're getting used to pushing those flashers when they're crossing roads, and just trying to reinforce those habits all the way along our off road. And these intersections can be dangerous, and I know as a parent, even I hesitate to think about, you know, even when my kids are on the corridor trail, I am nervous that they're crossing Mamquam and just Garibaldi Road. Garibaldi Way, and I'll think the same way here. And so I'm just trying to think of ways that would make it safer for those younger members of our community to come across these very busy intersections. So if there's something that MOTI is open to, it would be interesting to incorporate that.
Sounds good.
Councillor Raistlin, Councillor Herford.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep into designing intersections here, but it seems to me that if we do direct the pedestrian traffic to the left of the picture and away from the red line, and there is no crosswalk apparently across Highway 99 on the north side of the intersection, only on the south side of the intersection, that we could do away with the crosswalk on the north side altogether, the one that crosses the right off, and just avoid having people go to that little island altogether, because they wouldn't be crossing down and they wouldn't be crossing across from there. They'd be going somewhere else, and the only crosswalk you'd need across Highway 99 would be the one on the south side of the intersection. So, as I said, I don't want to start designing this thing. I'll leave it to think about that. But we might start taking away some of the other alternatives. Generally, human nature being what it is, I agree with Councillor Herford that if there's a way, people will start doing it.
Okay, thank you.
You lost me a bit there, Councillor Rice.
Me too.
What did you want to take away?
The crosswalk on the right off, on the north side of the intersection,
Yeah.
you don't need to get to that little island because it only goes across Commercial Way from that little island. It doesn't go across Highway 99. On the south island, that south little traffic island,
Yeah, but how do I get from, if I'm coming south on the trail,
you go over to the west like you're supposed to, then come down and then come back in.
oh, that's a big habit change.
That's right.
Now I'm lost. I thought I
So,
understood it.
You need a wall.
If it's, so the idea is if you're coming south down the trail,
You're gonna go to
Yeah.
we
Councillor Race
want
wants them to go that way.
to direct people to the,
You don't have to go up there to that crosswalk that's there at the right off, right there. You don't have to use that one.
Where do you go?
You go
You
to
go
the west
to the
and
west.
across the crosswalk.
I think you're talking about going to the west, aren't you?
no, we
No.
want to
No.
direct them, we actually talked in some detail through the mayor.
Oh.
We actually talked in some detail with MOTI about whether we could I've lost my mouses somewhere, whether we can direct people down and away from the highway to a mid-block cross, and across a mid-block cross and then back, whether that might be safer. And they felt that putting extra crosswalks, and you're still pretty close to the highway, that wouldn't be a good option. They wanted to push it all the way to the intersection, which is just too far. Nobody's going to do it. I wouldn't do it. And so we had to come back to basically forcing them to the light. So you come loop around, if I can find the mouse again. There it is. So you come down the trail, you loop a little bit backwards, which is a bit counterintuitive. And right now it's a very narrow gravel shoulder and really not very inviting. So you loop, we would have some signage here, say go that way. Loop here, at this point you have good visibility on the decelerating cars coming off the highway. Wait your turn, come down across the crosswalk. The mouse disappeared again. There it is. Onto the island, push the button, wait for the light, cross. And then cross the crosswalk here and back and loop around and down.
Okay, I take everything back then. That's not what we discussed on the tour. We were actually considering the possibility of going to the west.
Yeah.
So that's maybe where I got lost, sorry.
Okay. So you're on the same page now. I do remember that conversation from the tour. But obviously MOTI said not there. It has to be either all the way to the end of the block or staying at the lights here. That's right. Councillor Herford.
Just in a general comment to the whole, well, not just this picture, but we can use this one as an example. Trying to round these out so that it flows from one to the next keeps the behavior easier to control, as well as effectively shortens the route. And it comes to mind here where we're trying to get people to go to that crosswalk, but we've gone this way and then that way and then across, whereas if it just went to the crosswalk. So I know I don't know if that ditch is a riparian zone, or I know there's elevations to deal with there, but if it just went right in, and that's in general when you go back to the sort of that realignment that I think Doug was talking about earlier with the part of the trail further south that has just been put in by the school. To get back onto that trail, you go back down past the high school and then back left again through and on the map it definitely looks like a full zigzag. So as the Buckley project comes on and other pieces get added, I'm happy to see that this intersection is being addressed, but I feel that we need more focus on that flow aspect, and we won't have to control the users of the trail as much, as we'll just deliver them to where we want them to be, and that there's opportunity to effectively shorten the journey by quite a bit if we are able to sort of round out some of these awkward edges of it. And this is a prime example of a strange chicane that maybe we could.
So the question would be, do we have the ability to just redirect the trail right to the crosswalk? Is there a right of way there we can acquire? Or whose property is that?
So we are going to revise the designs slightly before we construct them. Unfortunately, there are large ditches there, so our ability to fully realign it to line up with the crosswalk is limited, but we might be able to do something a little better than what I'm showing on this image here. It's a great thought.
We're not allowed to fill in a ditch?
It's very expensive when they're large.
That would be the option, would be a pedestrian bridge at an angle, essentially, which would not be an inexpensive thing to do. It's not an impossible thing to do. It may not be in this project scope, though, at this point.
As much as it would be nice if we could incorporate into things that we're spending money on, but more just in the broader picture of it, to sort of round out some of those sharp edges so that it shortens the journey, and hopefully will positively affect the numbers of users.
We had a great idea, because even if there is a cost to a bridge or something like that, we could probably do away with those sidewalks that you've got colored in gray there, because we wouldn't need them. And so Well, maybe I guess not. No, because you have to connect to the other sidewalks, I beg your pardon. So I'm gonna take that one back too.
You're on a roll.
I'm 0 for 2 in this presentation.
Okay, any other questions, Councillor French?
I certainly support Councillor Herford's thoughts on rounding those out for both of these intersections. Being a runner who goes through this area, it's not at all enticing to do the round and back. And I just really don't see people using the safety that's there unless we direct them right to the crosswalks.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on the floor? Oh. Someone like to move a motion? Councillor French. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, item 4 is under one roof affordable housing project waiving of fees.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Gary Buxton, the General Manager here at the District. Jonas Valanishkas, Director of Community Planning. So we're here to talk about waiving development cost charges and various district permitting fees for the Under One Roof project, which is a comprehensive access to food, shelter and support services for people in need, particularly those in housing need, operated by the Helping Hands Society that we're partnering with on the project on land just on 3rd Avenue, just a block away from here. The partners on that include the Food Bank, Cutting Barriers, Vancouver Coastal Health, and I say it's really an emergency shelter and food bank and a range of related uses and social housing options. We can reduce or waive charges through bylaw. We have 2 relevant bylaws here, the District's Development Cost Charges Bylaw. There are specific provisions for affordable housing and the project meets those the definitions under subsection A. The Fees and Charges Bylaw similarly has exemptions for fees of various nature. We previously executed an MOU with the Helping Hands Society and BC Housing regarding fees when we, I hesitate to say committed, but certainly suggested that we would entertain the waiving of fees. The chart at the bottom of page 69 provides the fees that we're proposing to waive, ranging from the zoning amendment right down to road closure fees that amount to a little over $200,000, most of which is in the development, probably about half of that is development cost charges. So the recommendation is that we waive the fees under the Development Cost Charges Bylaw and the Fees and Charges Bylaw. If Council has any questions, certainly.
Any questions? Don't see any. Councillor Race?
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any conversation? Councillor Race?
Well, just this being involved in the approval of this in the first place, this for me was at least all part of the contribution the district was going to make to this project, fees and the land. And so this is the fees portion, so happy to support it.
Any other comments? No, this is part of supporting these types of housing developments, and I'm happy to do it. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, so the next 2 motions are about rescheduling some public hearings. The first is for the District of Squamish Bylaw No. 2200/2011 Amendment number 2565/2017.
Just a quick update. The reason why this change is being requested is because the applicants are working on gathering the information that's necessary for the public hearing. It won't be ready till later in the spring.
Okay, so the motion is to move it from February 12th to April 2nd. I'll move that. Second by Councillor Race. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Number 6 was scheduled for the same night. And we have kindly asked them to move to the 19th so that it lines up with our next regular business meeting, so that council will not meeting in the evening 2 weeks ago. And they've agreed to that. So thank you for them. So that is District of Squamish Bylaw number 22/2011, amended bylaw number 22/71 for the property at 1080 Wilson Crescent. And that public hearing be rescheduled for February 19th. Moved by Councilor Hooper, second by Councilor Pettingill. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And please thank the applicant for accommodating that request. Next up, Community Enhancement Grant Program 2018. There were recommendations missed from the December 18th regular business meeting. And so that the motion is that council approve the following grant in-kind applications. One for the Firefighters Association in the amount of $1,158.60, and the other for House Sound Secondary School for $2,687. Do you have a question? Okay. CFO will answer your question. Councilor French?
I'm just wondering if there's any context for what are the firefighters doing with this and with House Sound Secondary School? I think it's graduation for House Sound Secondary.
Thank you. Through the mayor. One was the Firefighters Association was the Guns and Hoses facility rental. Both of these were in kind. Council actually reviewed them on November 27th in our CAL, unfortunately, and did approve them both in consensus discussions. Unfortunately, they just got missed on the spreadsheet when the minutes were done. So the House Sound Secondary School, I believe, was for the grad.
Well, I just had a question. If it was missed from the motions, did we miss it on our, are we over by this much again from where we were in our positions on the
no,
these
through
grants? Or it was included in the spreadsheet, just didn't make it to the motion?
Through the chair, exactly. We were tracking it on the spreadsheet. Our spreadsheet reflected it to you. Unfortunately, it just didn't get picked up in the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Rice, seconded by Councilor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, there's item is our consent agenda. So there's minutes here. I had a question on the special business meeting from January 8th. I'm sorry, I'm just going to scroll down so I can find the notes here. Councilor Herford, I believe that was the night we were talking about the new building next to 8 Brain Brewing. You put a motion forward.
Page
I'm trying to find the page.
127 of 250.
I think it starts at 126. It goes 127.
Thank you. Where is it?
At the bottom of page 127 is where moved by Councilor Herford, and I seconded it.
You seconded it. And then opposed was Elliott, Herford, Race, Anderson, Stoner, Pettingill. Did you vote against your own motion?
I did not vote against my own motion.
I think it was French. You opposed, or did you vote for it as
No,
well?
I'm sure I voted for this.
Okay, so it should reflect that Mayor Elliott and Councilors Race, Anderson, Stoner, and Pettingill opposed. Because I didn't think you voted against your own motion.
Thank you for catching that. I don't know why.
So that's the special business meeting minutes approved as corrected to reflect.
Approved?
Yeah, fix that.
That's corrected to reflect.
That's right.
So with that change, that we move that these following minutes be approved by council. Oh, did you have a question?
Is now the time to pull letters, or that's the next?
That's next.
Okay.
Oh wait, so, hold on a second. No, this is part of the consent agenda, isn't it? Correspondence received for information. So yes, if you want to pull letters, now is the time to do it. Councilor Petty.
So I have did my best to convert from Roman numerals, but 1, 3, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 17.
Uh-oh, one? Hold on, go again, 1?
1, 3, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 17.
13, 14?
Yeah. and 17.
14. Holy cow, all right. Any others?
9, please.
Okay. Any others? Councilor Hurd.
2.
2. Okay. Councilor Anderson.
Perhaps we've already covered it, but 17.
Yes, that one was pulled by.
Thank you.
Councilor Campbell. Any others? Okay. Okay, so what's the order that I do this, Ms. Arthurs? We discuss the letters first, or do I approve the consent agenda and then we deal with the letters?
Approve the consent agenda and then deal with the letters that were pulled.
Okay. So, motion to approve the consent agenda with the correction on the minutes and by Councilor, seconded by Councilor French. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We're going to go in order. Number 1. Councilor Campbell, most of these are yours.
Yeah, so I'm bundling number 1 and 11, and it's with regards to the West Coast Environmental Law letter. Just as we've been looking at our strategic plan and talking about possibly funding a position with regards to defining our greenhouse gas emissions for the community, some of what was in this letter seemed to fit, in my mind, well within that responsibility. So I'm wondering if this is worth referring to staff as opposed to just receiving, and as we proceed with that, staff can consider how that fits.
You're moving forward to staff?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder?
1 and 11?
1 and 11, is that right, Councilor Pango?
Yeah.
Seconded by Councilor French. Any discussion? And are you specifically speaking to tracking our climate change expenses?
Yeah, and it just seemed to me it fit in well with asset management and some of those, a lot of the things we're talking about.
Did you comment?
Yes.
Yeah, Councilor.
So I can't support this, and I looked at that letter and started thinking about things I know about going on in Squamish. And you take, for example, the sea dike and the diking around the district for the ocean, which is going to be in total a significant cost. And then you try to break it out, and part of it is due to nature. 10,000 years ago, there used to be 2 kilometers of ice here, so clearly we're in a warming trend since then. And part of it is due to seismic potential, part of it is due to just storm surge, and part of it is due to potential sea level rise. And to try and break that down, I think would be complex at best. And to have staff spend time on that seems to me to be not efficient use of staff time. So I would not support this.
If I can respond, I mean, I guess when I'm talking about referring to staff at this point, it's not a direction to calculate all these expenses out. It's more just as we're looking at this new role and the sorts of things they might consider, this is a piece of just what should be in the back of their mind as they're looking at all these things, as opposed to direction to actually do these calculations.
I understood the motion to be one of a lens of climate change across our asset management requirements for infrastructure, rather than directing staff to do work. Any other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Councilor Reyes opposes. Motion carries. Okay, number 2. That was over here.
Yeah, I've just heard some this was one letter, but I've seen and heard from some members of the community about this project, the Mountain Canyon project, and I'm wondering if I haven't heard about it in my official capacity from the proponent or from from staff. So I was we put that forward to staff to provide some update or invite proponents to come and speak. And I feel that there's a public engagement piece that seems to be missing from this project, and I think it should be brought out so we can discuss it.
Maybe Mr. Valentine, you can speak to our jurisdiction or what role we play in this project.
Yes, so through you, Mayor, we have a temporary use permit application for this area from the proponent. We're in the early stages of reviewing that application. It will be coming to council, but it's not ready yet. We're still dealing with a few questions that we need answers to, but I suspect it will be coming for at least initial review in early spring.
And then with the temporary use permit procedure, there's a public engagement portion of that, yeah?
So normally on something like this, there would be a public information meeting first, and then the temporary use permit itself would be like a public hearing. So there would be an opportunity for the public to speak.
Thank you. Councilor Reyes?
But I think maybe it's appropriate that this be referred to staff, be part of the record, so I'll make that motion.
Moved by Councilor Reyes, second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, letter number 3. Oh, this one. Oh, Councilor Patton.
And this may be a bigger conversation for another time, but when I read through, there's a couple programs for more child care space. My understanding is that in Squamish, the primary obstacle, though, is affordability for staff to find housing, and that's where our main obstacle is, and we're hoping to deal with that with some of our housing affordability in the strategic plan. I just wanted to double check with staff if I can, if that understanding is correct, or do we still have a large issue with space as well? And again, maybe this is a conversation for another day.
Through you, Mayor. So I think it's both of them are issues, affordability and childcare spaces, and they're like a lot of factors in Squamish are related to affordability. This is, I believe, the same 2 grants that we have put an application in for. Yeah, the deadline has passed, so we submitted the application for both of these.
We did do or receive the child care needs assessment at the end of last year.
Yes.
At the end of last year, so that information in terms of training and space requirements. The space requirements was a large number, and we have a big gap in training and affordability side of things. Okay, thank you for that. Letter number 7, Sea Sky Crime Stoppers.
So I just wanted to pull this because it's sort of, I think, a really nice community success story. We in our tour this morning saw the fire hall, which is more, I guess, in our first responder type community, and the volunteer firefighters are a big part of that. So it just got me thinking about how much our community still relies on and benefits from volunteers. So I just wanted to call it Crime Stoppers and say thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Councilor Frank. It's true, they've done a good job, and we saw our crime stats decrease when the RCMP was here last week, so they certainly do important work in the community for sure. Letter number 9.
So in this letter, Mr. Reiser is pointing out discrepancy around how late retail cannabis operations can stay open. I'd like to refer this to staff for comment, unless it can be addressed now. And then in point number 3, currently $5,000 for an illegal dispensary business license, and he's commented on that. So either refer to staff, or if there's something we can address right now, right?
I can address some of those points right now. So as Mr. Reiser point raised, there are a few aspects in our business licensing bylaw that conflict with the provincial regulations. The hours of operation, I don't believe is a conflict. It's simply we have a stricter application of the hours than the province. But we might want to consider aligning it as well. So we will be bringing forward the business license bylaw and the zoning bylaw up for review this year. In terms of application fee, we've set up the application fee higher than other retail businesses because the number of requirements that we have are higher, so it takes more staff time to review these applications, and now we have to advertise them to the public as per the provincial regulations. So I don't know, I think time will show whether the fees that we are applying, which is $5,000 per license per year, are excessive. I think we set them up that way because we were expecting a larger enforcement component and more resources to review the applications. But I suspect that as time goes on, things will get streamlined and perhaps there will be rationale to reduce the fee because it's not costing us as much.
I think we have ongoing inspection requirements, is that correct?
Yeah.
Or is the province enforcing their rules?
We will see. It's a bit of an unknown how the province was going to enforce the rules.
We shall see. The next down happens. So do you still want to refer this to the business license update discussion when it comes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 11 we dealt with number 1. 12, did someone pull 12?
12, 13.
12, 13. I was going to pull these, but do you want to?
Sure. I was just curious, I know we've decided to pull the bins for now. Both groups have talked about changes they've made for the bins to address safety concerns, so I'm just wondering what the process is or what the trigger is to potentially review this in the future and just some sort of understanding on that.
Yeah, through the mayor, we have left the bin the only bin that remains that's on district land is at the landfill because it has an attendant. The bins that are on district land that do not have an attendant, we have removed them. There still remains several bins on private property that we had sent letters advising the landowners that we urged them to ask for the bins to be removed due to safety concerns. We were pleased to see that both companies have largely mitigated the safety issues. It is a reduced risk. It is not no risk. It is a bin that's unattended and that's vulnerable people. Staff felt that it was still some degree of risk to the extent that we wouldn't feel comfortable putting it back on district land at this time without an attendant. But bins do exist in the community for others for people to make donations.
So would we sort of, in 2 years from now, look at the experience other communities have had with these sorts of bins and see if we want to change our mind, or is it just sort of, if someone asks about it in 2 years, that's when we would look at it again? Or?
Certainly. I think also we need to look at whether or not there was a deficit of donation options. We've been talking to Pearls and their volume has increased a little bit. What's the kind of capacity demand alignment in terms of donation opportunities for people? So we'd watch that too.
I was going to move that these letters be referred to the CAO. She made a decision on this file, and so it just keeps her up to date on the responses that come up. Someone wants to second that? Seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 12, 14. That was a picture.
So I had a really good conversation with Mr. Lynn, and this is an area where, as a councillor, I'm wanting to make sure I remain at a high level of big picture values, and Mr. Lynn had very specific concerns, and I think some actually good feedback, and I had an experience in the van myself this morning, and I might even agree with him on some things, but I also was able to share with him some of the things I learned from staff, and he seemed very receptive to that information. One of the reasons why I wanted to highlight this is at the local government training, they talked about how as individuals we're the same people, but there's a lot of reverence for the title. It means a lot, and to speak to Mel, he was very excited that his letter would be on the agenda tonight, and he had a personal engagement that he couldn't get out of in the city, so he's unable to be here. But it just reminded me that to members of the public, getting something on an agenda, having their issue discussed is really, really important. So I just wanted to highlight this. I'm always debating with myself, do I refer this to staff? And I'm actually wondering if we don't refer it to staff, when do staff read these letters, and how much consideration do they get? I'm just wondering if that's something you can comment on briefly.
Ms. Arthur's comment on it.
So all of the correspondence that comes in gets, it gets lots of hands-on and lots of touches. And what happens is it comes in, it goes through a council disposition process. We reach out to every single one of the people. So sometimes when we get these big mass mailings, and especially from other levels of government, we don't respond. But for like Mr. Lynn or any of these individual residents, Jackie McBride, etc., we would reach out and say, your item is going to be on the council agenda on this date for consideration. We let everybody know. Or in addition to that, it's also been referred to the Director of Community Planning for consideration with this file. So we do tell them exactly what's happening with their item. And sometimes they've received responses from staff ahead of it even coming onto the agenda too. So you reaching out to them as well is an added personal touch. But we do appreciate some of these individual contributions. We let them know what's happening.
So I'll just add that, and thank you. That I appreciate that as a municipality, we're trying to balance a lot of things, and Mel had some concerns that he raised, but he was also again very receptive to the information I was able to share with him, and it was really good to see how excited actually he was about the service, the opportunity to use this van and some of the things they wanted to do as seniors with it, and were able to do, and there's a lot of enthusiasm there as well.
Last letters, so there's a group of them. Item 17, there's a few of you that want to speak to this, so maybe I'll go over to sum up a new face. Councillor Anderson?
Yes, thank you. The letter addressing wildlife corridors and the suggesting a new emphasis on them, attention to them. Wildlife corridors are changing in their use, and we've seen that over the past decade with elk crossing the highway, which is a relatively new phenomenon. There's always been deer in the East Loggers Lane area, but elk is relatively new. There's also new uses of other highway crossings that have been noted by observers over recent years with the highway development. There's also maintenance issues of wildlife corridors that perhaps should be addressed, and one example is the Wilson Crescent Carson Place Slough between the CN railway tracks and the Upper Manitoulin Blind Channel is an important wildlife corridor that has ongoing maintenance issues. So I'd like to suggest that this letter be referred to staff with a specific ask how this a wildlife corridor initiative, if we were to entertain it, may relate to previous work on environmentally sensitive areas, the inventory completed in 2016, which did not address wildlife corridors, and how that project was begun with a scoping and gap analysis, and perhaps we might ask staff to what extent would we be looking at a scoping and gap analysis for wildlife corridors, because I do not see any specific suggestions as to course of action in any of the letters we have. more a spirit of what we should be doing as a general objective. So the ask then of staff is, how do we relate this request and this topic to work previously done in 2016? And what would we suggest as next steps? Perhaps it is a scoping and gap analysis.
One of the things is that this group has also requested a delegation. And I think this is important work, and delegations get all of 5 minutes on our agenda, according to our procedures bylaw. So I actually asked staff to meet with representatives of this group to understand their suggestion that they would be happy to help council move this forward, to understand in what capacity that looks like, because currently we don't have anything budgeted this year, nor the capacity, as I understand it, but maybe I'll let Mr. Buxton speak to that.
Yes, certainly there's nothing in this year's budget that even remotely addresses this issue. With respect to the prior work, it was never intended to do with animal movements, which is an entirely different subset of data from habitat evaluation. There is no data on animal movements that we're aware of, any meaningful data. So that's the principal problem. So yes, you're right. The first thing we need is a scoping project. We've already established an internal meeting to sort of rally the troops on our side, and then we'll schedule a meeting with the, I think there are half a dozen authors that have put their name to this, similar forms of this email. We'll meet with them, we'll discuss where we're at, what's possible, but there's nothing in this year's budget.
I follow up with the observation that we have a wildlife corridor extending from the Smoke Bluffs eastern slope down to the Little Squamish Creek. It's been a topic for the district in that it is also a potential road connection between Plateau Drive and Hospital Hill for a transit bus, for example. As recently as a few years ago, the wildlife corridor was not acknowledged by the district, but now it is. In a recent initiative regarding a neighborhood grant application, it is specifically highlighted as wildlife corridor by the District of Squamish. So what I'm suggesting is there's some policy work to be done. Perhaps it's identifying on the map, but at any rate, there is some need to establish policy.
Sorry, we've acknowledged a wildlife corridor?
The multimodal transportation plan in 2009-2010 would not acknowledge that as a wildlife corridor, I can assure you. It was quite a
said we have recently.
We have?
Oh, you have? Yes. Well, a grant application from a neighborhood group under the community, Squamish Community Foundation has had the support of the district, to my knowledge. And the district has acknowledged that this is a wildlife corridor and that is the nature of the grant project.
Wow, that's news to me.
Okay.
Of course it's not, but we can certainly, there's no data to support that.
I see. Which is my point as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I would not disagree. That's the crux of the issue is data. So I would agree with you 100% on that.
Councillor Pengel, did you also pull this letter?
Yeah, I think
A series of letters?
I think I maybe don't have anything to add to this one at this point.
Okay.
Okay, we will meet with them and see where we can move this forward.
So I have delegated that to staff, and that once that conversation's happened, happy to have the delegation come back, but it's a big topic. And it's not an easy thing to tackle, and I didn't want them to have 5 minutes here and then us have, questions for staff that they're not able to address for us more fully. So that is the direction that's been given. So, was there, Councillor Rees?
Well, I was going to move that this be referred to staff, these letters be referred to staff. And I'll speak to it in a second.
Moved by Councillor Rees, seconded by Councillor Pengel.
And the reason I'm doing this, and this is, I guess, maybe the third time tonight, because when we refer them to staff, when there's something like this, I think as a council, what we're saying is here's something for the record, for the file, and we're asking staff to consider this as they go forward. And I don't want to get too prescriptive on how exactly they do that. But I think it's important not to just let these things drop when there's an ongoing project or something we think that should be looked into in the future. So that's the reason for the referral motion.
I'm happy to support that, because anytime I read the words, we would be happy to help move this forward. I want to know what that means and how much our community might be willing to do on any project, because we do have capacity issues. So look forward to hearing what comes of that meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We approved the consent agenda. We've done the letters. Correspondence.
You have to move receipt.
Oh yeah, now we have to. No, I did that.
We did that first, and then
Don't confuse me, Councillor Rice. I'm still getting used to this. So we have 3 other letters with action requested. That correspondence from Stu Bertrand regarding cannabis retail be referred to community planning. Moved by. Right, second by Councillor Hooper. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Then a letter from W. Keeland from Cardinal Concrete be referred to the engineering department. This was some traffic control issues. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Hooper. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And Nicholas Bodie regarding replacement of the Jack Webster Bridge be referred to engineering for response. Moved by Councillor Hooper, seconded by Councillor Rice. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We have minutes to approve. Oh no, these are recommendations from the minutes. District of Squamish authorized the mayor and corporate officer to execute the amendment number 2 to the BC Transit and District of Squamish operating agreement.
Yep. There's one ahead of it.
Oh, right, the BC Transit. Can I do all these? I have to do them separately. They're all related to transit.
They're all related to transit, but they're all slightly.
Okay, the BC Transit bring back a review of fare strategies and impact review to a future meeting. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish authorized the mayor and corporate officer to execute amendment number 2 to our annual operating agreement. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That District of Squamish continue operating the South Squamish Park service in summer 2019 with service optimization, considering and implementing if possible the Adventure Center and possibly Brennan Park.
Quick question about
Yes.
as part of that discussion, we were talking about the issue of the turnaround at Shannon Falls was brought up. I don't see that captured here. Do we feel that was addressed as a potential, as a suggestion to shorten the turnaround times to maybe facilitate the access to the Adventure Center? I don't see that captured in here at all. So that would be stopping at the top of Darrell Bay.
Do you want to amend this question?
Could we, I feel like we got to that as a consensus. Should I move to amend this portion of it? And how should we do that? So the additional operating Squamish Parks, service optimization considering implementing possible Adventure Center 2019, Brennan Park in 2020.
I think you would put it after the Adventure Center.
Yeah, I was thinking just at the south end of the route, options for turnaround.
Did we have time to bring them this year?
This year, I think that could be part of facilitating the Adventure Center expansion. It's a time.
So in service in summer 2019 with service optimization, considering a better turnaround at Shannon Falls. And implementing if possible the Adventure Center in 2019 and possibly Brennan Park in 2020. That's your motion?
Yes, that is my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herbert. Seconded by Councillor Race. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. From our January 29th Committee of the Whole, District of Squamish received a Phase 1 short-term rental engagement summary and provide feedback as follows. And I'm not reading out all those bullet points. And that the District of Squamish initiate further community consultation on the identified alternative regulatory options as presented in the January 2019 report from community planning as part of the ongoing short-term rental engagement. Unless council feels we missed a bullet point, that is the motion on the floor. Removing that. Moved by Councilor Hurd, seconded by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. I'm in conflict on the next one. So, Acting Mayor Hurd, I'll ask you to do that last one for the Whistler Center for Sustainability. Oh, I guess I can declare that conflict. I'm in conflict on this one because I am a member of the board of the Whistler Center for Sustainability. So I will keep one.
So, in this one, the motion is that the council fund the $2,000 for the Center for Whistler Sustainability from council contingency and request the application go through the community enhancement grant process.
My recollection was that we wanted to see the application to understand it and for possibly next year, but we didn't expect them to go through the process per se. So I thought that's what we were. Maybe I misunderstood.
My
Through the chair, my recollection was what the resolution indicates was that we still wanted them to go through the process because we didn't want them to feel that this was a good way to go around the process, and we wanted to make sure we were fair to all of our other applicants.
Yeah. So, you're moving it then? Second. Second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Motion carries.
We have any business arising from the minutes? Councilor Anderson.
Yes, if I may, I'd like to make an observation regarding the advisory design panel. The minutes do not record in detail Ms. Nisby or from our planning department's presentation. I'd just like to note that in Ms. Nisby's description of the context of the Newport development in the oceanfront peninsula, that the Site B area, which nowhere appeared on a map, and I think it is preferable to show a map of the context, it was described as an area used for log handling with the assumption one might take that is its continued use. But in fact, in the OCP and in the terms of the lease, especially for the West Bar lease, and according to present zoning, the use of Site B is not limited to log handling, and there's a history of project plans and proposals. So I just wanted to make that observation for considering the interests and expertise represented in an advisory design panel meeting, that's fairly important information, or we wouldn't want to regret that anybody or leave anybody confused as to that fact. And I think it is a significant fact because we should be mindful of potential interface issues in future. But the future of Site B may not entirely be just limited to log handling. There's long-standing plans and allowance in policy for other uses there that the neighbors should be aware of.
Councilor Anderson? We have minutes to approve from the advisory design panel for December 13th. These minutes you feel do not reflect Ms. Nasby's presentation?
But we can't amend.
In fact,
we can't amend their minutes, so we can only...
We can note it in our minutes.
We can note it. Thank you. That we receive the minutes of the December 13th advisory design panel meeting for information. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Hurd. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. that we receive the minutes of the January 8th Public Arts Select Committee meeting for information. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Del Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There was no staff in-camera announcements. Open question period. Mr. Chua, any questions for us?
Pretty good, yeah.
All right. Any council or staff announcements? Councillor French.
On Sunday, I had the honor to be the race announcer at Whistler Olympic Park, the Sea to Sky Nordics. Members of that group participated in Coast Cup number 2, a cross-country ski event in the Callahan Valley. And they participated with skiers from across southwestern BC, Metro Vancouver. The weather was not great, high winds, blowing snow. But the 300 competitors aged from 4 to about 84 had a great time. I just want to acknowledge that event and the small army of volunteers that braved the weather to put it on.
Councillor French, any other announcements? Councillor Bird?
During the recent windstorm, we lost power at my house, and I'm sure many other houses, and in the aftermath of that, going out the next day and seeing the level of destruction that it caused and the amount of trees down, and knowing the conditions, I was amazed at how short a period of time the power was out for. Considering, I'd just like to thank everyone involved in that process. I know our firefighters were out there as well as support, and BC Hydro, and I'm assuming the all hands on deck panic button got pushed around, and I was very impressed with how fast they got the power back on, and it got warmer in my house very quickly. So thank you to all involved in that, and I'm glad everyone was safe.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, did I see you again?
A few weeks ago, several of us were able to attend the Lower Mainland Leadership Academy, if I have the name of the event and agency correct. And I just wanted to mention as a new councillor, I found it an extraordinary, valuable to participate in it. It was a little bit of hit and miss, but sometimes there were unexpected surprises. I attended Planning 101, thought it was going to be a bore, that we've covered most of it here already, but towards the end of it we got into some specific topics, and the planner representing City of North Vancouver was extraordinary his ability to dive in without notes into the most arcane topics. And other sessions of value were media skills from former Premier Clark's media advisor. So all in all, very rewarding, valuable session for I think most of us there.
Thank you. Councillor Pagno.
Well, at the same conference, Court Larrabee did a session with Mayor Jack Crompton from Whistler about Indigenous local government relations. As it happens, Court Larrabee is the vice president of the First Nations snowboard team, and he invited me to go riding with them. So that weekend, which is 2 weeks ago now, I got to ride with the team. There's kids from Squamish to Mount Currie, and volunteers from Squamish, Whistler, all over, and it was just such a fun day. The kids were smiling, laughing all day, and getting back to the volunteer theme I spoke a bit about earlier, just, there's all these little groups helping each other out, doing things, and we don't always realize them all, but it really does make such a difference, and it was great to see this, again, kids from across the corridor getting together and having a good time.
Sounds like a fun day. I'm glad you got to do that. You've got more? Yes, Councillor.
As we have Proclaimed Heritage Week, I thought I should.
I knew it!
Last Thursday, I attended with the Squamish delegation. I was representing the local community group at a Heritage BC, the sponsor of the resolution that we have adopted this evening. Heritage BC had a session in North Vancouver, and there were delegations from Whistler, Squamish, West Vancouver, North Van, all the way to Deep Cove. We found we had a lot in common. Local government representatives were there as well from Whistler and North Vancouver. And it began at a very high level. What is heritage? What is culture? Where do arts and natural history fit in? And it was conclusion, Heritage BC is passing on recommendations to the provincial government, much as other organizations were doing a couple of years ago regarding arts and culture. I found that we in Squamish are not alone in where we're at, and that is there's lots of work to do and ways to adapt to where we are today. And it was suggested that cultural tourism is not only an economic development strategy, it includes heritage, it's also community enrichment. And cultural tourism should be by, of, and for the community. So in summary, the discussions were about definitions, and that was the most valuable thing, and it gives us tools to go back to our communities and approach our local governments to discuss advancing heritage policy and initiatives.
Tomorrow is my first drop-in with the mayor from 11 till 12. So anybody who's interested out there that wants to come in and have a chat, we serve coffee, tea, cookies, and certainly council members, if you want to drop by, you can. I've invited Acting Mayor Herford to join me for that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Other than that, I've got nothing else. Motion to terminate. By Councilor Herford, second by Councilor French. All those in favor?